Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving right into a really fascinating piece of textual anatomy. We're going to formally examine how a single, compact verse, 2 Samuel 22:16, reveals the ordered fullness of God. And here's the crucial part. We are going to see how the text achieves this without dividing him into multiple persons and without flattening him out into a shapeless abstraction.
Have you ever read a Bible verse and wondered if there's an entire blueprint hiding just beneath the surface? That's the analytical question we need to ask today. Does 2 Samuel 22:16 merely give us a generic "God did it," or does it reveal something much more profound? Let's figure that out by exploring how this one verse maps out the one God through distinguishable realities within his own being.
To carefully dissect this, here is our roadmap. We'll start with the question of action, then move to the subject and personal I. From there, we'll look at spirit and living structure, then one unified divine action. And finally, we'll synthesize it all into 3 simultaneous realities.
Starting off with Section 1, the question of action, and unpacking 2 Samuel 22:16.
Then the channels of the sea appeared, the foundations of the world were exposed by the rebuke of the Lord from the blast of the breath of his nostrils. Now, the wording here is incredibly compact, right? But notice that it is absolutely not flat. It doesn't just casually say God acted. Instead, it provides a vivid, highly structured picture of divine action.
If we look closely, we can isolate 5 distinct scriptural elements in this verse. We have Yahweh, the possessive his, the ruach, the neshama, and the nostrils. Breaking the text down like this proves a really important point right out of the gate. The one God is not a shapeless fog.
Moving to Section 2, the subject and personal I, where we see monotheism firmly established.
From the very first word, the verse is strictly monotheistic. The action belongs exclusively to Yahweh, the Lord. He is the one God acting as the whole divine subject. There's no independent divine agent acting beside him here. Every single thing we're about to look at belongs strictly to him.
And that brings us to a crucial piece of grammar, the possessive word his. It might seem like a small detail, but it's massive. The possessive his reveals personal ownership and inward selfhood. It identifies God as the living, personal possessor, the divine I or soul reality. This perfectly grounds everything, establishing that these ensuing realities belong to the one, living, personal God.
Which leads us to Section 3, spirit and living structure, focusing on inward source and form.
The text uses the Hebrew word ruach. Now, a lot of English translations unintentionally flatten this into a generic breath image, but ruach precisely identifies God's own spirit. It is his inward source power and spirit reality. And it is vital to catch this. This spirit isn't detached from him, nor is it a second person sitting beside him. It is the very source of divine life and action belonging directly to him.
To structurally anchor this idea, let's look briefly at Isaiah 31:3. This verse clearly tells us that God is not flesh. The one God belongs to the order of spirit. He is spirit being. And because he is spirit being, he naturally has his own ruach, his own inward spirit reality.
Next up, the verse speaks of his nostrils. Now, nostrils absolutely does not mean literal biological anatomy made of flesh, because, as we just saw, God is spirit. But on the flip side, it also doesn't just mean empty metaphor. Instead, nostrils functions as revelatory designator language for God's living structure, his form. The designator is creature-facing so we can actually wrap our minds around it, but the reality designated belongs to God himself. It reveals actual, living spiritual structure.
Let's look at how this all comes together in Section 4. One unified divine action focusing on the neshama.
This brings us to the neshama, which points to the blast or the preceding breath force. The main takeaway here, the neshama is not a fourth divine reality, and it's not a fourth category within God. Rather, it's the expressed force of the action that proceeds from his ruach, right through his living structure. It vividly shows all these realities functioning together in one single divine action.
And this actually illustrates a really consistent scriptural pattern. For example, Psalm 33:6 uses parallel mouth language in the context of creation to point to the exact same truth, God's own living spiritual form. The designator shifts from nostrils to mouth, sure, but the underlying pattern of unified divine action proceeding through living structure remains exactly the same.
Finally, we reach Section 5, 3 simultaneous realities, where we bring it all together into a synthesis.
Let's see how this builds, step by step. Step 1. Yahweh remains one as the whole acting subject. Step 2, his ruach belongs to him as his inward source power. Step 3, his nostrils reveal living structure, his divine form. Aspectable monotheism receives and preserves what Scripture reveals, showing us that God is personally, spiritually, and structurally full.
As we study this, it is absolutely crucial that we respect certain theological boundaries. These realities are simultaneous. They are not modal roles that God just temporarily assumes. They're distinguishable from one another, but they are not separate. And most importantly, they belong to the one God, not to multiple persons within God. We aren't creating this framework, the text reveals the distinctions.
To wrap up our explainer today, let's look at this final summary. In one verse, Scripture gives one divine action and reveals three simultaneous realities within the one God. Yahweh remains one, his ruach belongs to him, his nostrils reveal living structure, the neshama proceeds in divine action. The realities are simultaneous, not modal, distinguishable, not separate, and they belong to the one living God. When you realize a single verse contains this much architectural depth about our Creator, it really leaves you wondering, what other profound realities are we missing when we read right past the anatomy of God?